Success Capital organization, a queer youth, feminist-led, managed and serving organization, brings you a dialogue in the spirit of South-to-South cooperation and ideation, commemorating International Transgender Day of Visibility. Transpose, curated by Francis Trans, a grassroots collective in northern Botswana, provided an opportunity to document voices beyond gender binaries in more rural areas in Botswana. It presented globally reflective experiences of exclusion, harmful norms, oppression, performative expectations of expression, and variant forms of violence against transgender, gender non-conforming, non-binary, and other forms of non-normative gender-related experiences. First commemorated in 2009, International Transgender Day of Visibility provides an opportunity to recognize and celebrate trans individuals whilst illuminating inequalities and discrimination experienced by many, regardless of socioeconomic and legal jurisdiction. This year's commemoration provides an opportunity to reflect on the gains more than just the losses and imagine what transcendence, transnational, and transformative existence and resistance can look like, further allowing ideation towards a world where there would be no need to continuously fight and safeguard existence and resistance. In the form of an online dialogue commemorating Transgender Day of Visibility, it is to encourage and inspire ideation, imagining, and reiterating Success Capital organization's grassroots origins and purpose for shifting queer youth from a state of perpetual survival to one of success. And I'm very privileged to have with me today dynamic, and I must confess, I was really quite amazed when we first met at the LGBT Data Conference, Joanne, who's currently studying for a master's degree in Taipei, but based in Hong Kong. And so Joanne, welcome, and thank you very much for accepting this invite to commemorate this dialogue.
Hi. I'm very happy to be here. Also,
thank you.
Yeah.
So, Joanne, I guess maybe the first question that I'd really ask is, why the need for visibility? Why is visibility important for us in this challenging and complex world?
I think it's not easy to answer, but make it short. I think because first of all, we need to talk about the identification within the community, because a lot of people now identify themselves as transgender people, but there's still a lot of oppression within the community. They can see, oh, I identify myself as transgender people, so all transgender people are not like me. I don't think this is very real, because there's still a lot of transgender people. They didn't come out and they didn't tell you that they are transgender people, or maybe some cross-dress, they are being excluded from by the community. So we need more visibility to let the communities see how we are composed and how diverse we are, and then we can let the society to understand more about us. I think this is very important.
And you mentioned that now there's, yes, an increase in visibility and certain aspects of diversity and the importance of that. I'm curious on what role do you think that, for instance, data or evidence plays within the context of community experiences? Because sometimes we find that maybe data that when a report comes out, maybe it's data where experiences were like a year before, and somehow this is still supposed to be relevant for our lives today. And we know that some of those decisions are made based on that data that is dated, right? So I'm curious as to how can we bridge that gap, in as much as, yes, it's very important for us to have data, but for us to value lived experiences of trans individuals in their diversity and their beauty, whether it's in policy, whether it's in law, or whether it's even in just community organizing.
I think for data, that's very important. For example, like that the data conference we have joined before, and I still remember that a transgender person asked a question about why the researchers are not transgender identified. So somehow maybe we can we will think that they're not transgender people and they don't understand us, and then they do the research and how come it will be reflected. But I'm thinking the opposite, because actually when we don't have a lot of researchers from the transgender community, we need that those allies, friends, to help us to build up the data. And then we have the data, we get the resources, and then we have to encourage us, I mean the transgender community, to be the researcher ourselves. So that's why I come to Taiwan and take up the course and hope that I can learn more technique to do that. At least I can talk to the researcher, so we can cooperate, we can cooperate and tell them what exactly happening and what we need to ask in those research. That is very important.
That's very powerful. And as you're speaking, I was just reminded about how they're very one would say elitist, or in other words, barriers in terms of participation. And some of them, in one instance, is education, sometimes it's language. And I think these are very similar, even in, sort of trying to collaborate from a South to South perspective, where it's almost impossible to find, for instance, an Asian NGO collaborating with an African NGO, even though there's significant vulnerabilities that can be shared, political oppression, those who are opposing gender ideology, framing, and so forth. And so I'm very curious, do you think that there is value in South to South cooperation? Do you think that, there should be a push for actually having, whether it's Asian or South Asian, collaborating with Southern Africa or Africa, in terms of at least for LGBT organizing?
I think that is a very good question, but I'll be take it in a more macro way, because in these few years, I'm more focused in the Chinese speaking area, just like Taiwan, mainland China, and Hong Kong. Of course, in the rest of the world, there are a lot of people speaking Chinese also. And there is quite some special experience that we are experiencing in the transgender community, different from the other countries. So I don't think we only have to do more South to South cooperation or Asian to Asian cooperation, but we need to see how we different, and we need to see how we similar, and then do that kind of crossover cooperation, no matter it's North and South, or no matter it's Asian or Africa or whatever.
Thank you so much, Joanne. And I'm really happy that we actually have Mwamba from Tanzania. I think you came in at the right moment, as I was just asking on whether there's a possibility for South-to-South cooperation, or there can be a push for that. And Joanne, I think you've mentioned so many beautiful elements, at least in the short time that we've spoken, around research, around community engagement, around visibility, and around engaging allies. And so I'm then curious, to then ask, why must we, for instance, celebrate Transgender Day of Visibility? Because I know, yes, the history behind it, and I just unfortunately forgot the activist's name. I think it was in North America, who had actually spoken about how, we shouldn't just be celebrating those who have passed, because it was around Trans Day of Remembrance. And so, I'm really curious, what does a world without struggle look like for you? How would you define a world that wouldn't have to invalidate my experiences, that wouldn't have to tick a certain checkbox to say, yes, we've got inclusion? What does a world without struggle for trans individuals look like for you?
I think it's very interestingly, when I come out to the community, and I saw a very special thing that maybe I'm very stupid, foolish, or silly, but when I talk to the other people, I treat them as no difference with me. So when I have this kind of manner, I see things change differently, because they don't think that you are transgender people. They just treat me as they call normal people, but I don't want to use this name, normal, because everybody is the same human beings. But there's still a lot of exclusion and some inclusion, but you know, the inclusion is not so big enough that we can include everybody. And I think visibility can let people see that this world is the same. We are all diversity, and we are all rainbow. Within the so-called normal people, they are so different. And within the transgender community, we are also the same difference. So there's no difference at all, you know. So I think somehow when we talk about visibility, we always want to show the society that, oh, transgender community is like that. Only one way of transgender, being a transgender people. But I do think that visibility is talking about everybody is different. So this is the way I want to be visible to everybody. So when I become activist, I classify myself as a trans woman and lesbian. And that's very interesting, you know. But somehow, right now, I classify myself as a gender non-binary because we need more people to talk about gender is not a framework to oppress us, but is going to give us free to be who we are. But so I have one sentence to talk about my philosophy is that I transform from a male body to a better person, but not female. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah. And that's powerful. And you've alluded to, you know, gender fluidity and how it's not static. And it's important for us to sort of at least start understanding this. And then, you know, Mwamba, maybe just to bring you in, thank you so much for joining us. You know, it's just to sort of, maybe if you can share, you know, what for you is important in terms of visibility, what for you is important in terms of claiming space, what is important in terms of, I guess, reframing or deconstructing what gender is known as today. Mwamba?
Hello guys. Yes, my name is Mwamba Nyanda from Tanzania, from Executive Director of Tanzania Trans Initiative. To me means freedom. Freedom of expression, freedom of doing anything you want and however you feel like. But regarding to our country context, and how people are ignorant to know about transgender issues because they don't feel like it's important for people to be recognized as anything else better than a man or a woman. They do not want to anything in between. So for me, I think for me, visibility is freedom. And when we come back to our country context is that we need the visibility because people to understand that we are still here, we still exist, despite the ones that, former activists, trans activists who are already passed and gone. I mean, they did a great job and we are here to continue the same job. So they need to know that we are still here. And it is important to us because when we go to other spaces, people do really behave in such a peculiar way towards us, which makes us feel bad most of the time, makes us feel withdrawn in those such spaces. But now we are coming, today is our day, and we are showing them that we can exist in any kind of platform, and we cannot exist in any kind of platform. We create our own platform and we will show visibility. That is the reason, because we still need people to access.
Thank you, Mwamba. And I think, you know, internet connectivity is failing us a little bit, but I mean, we definitely got the gist of what you were saying. And, you know, as you were speaking, I was reminded of Nina Simone's words when, you know, she was being asked, what is freedom to you? And she said, freedom from fear. And I think, and I'm hoping you're still with us, Mwamba. I think, you know, then the question really should be, you know, what is needed for us to achieve that fear? To achieve that freedom from fear? What is needed for us to freely express ourselves? What is needed for us, to ensure that, as Joanne was mentioning, be a part of a community, for everyone to see that, we're just as different as everyone else is different, and that there's nothing that is essentially different. So what do you think is needed, especially within, the African context?
Number one is, first of all, we have to know that no one can give us anything in life. We have to get it. That is the first thing. And I know that most of the trans people, when they get violence, when they get discriminated, they withdraw. They become, what can I say? They self-stigmatize themselves, and they also become more introverts. But in this world of today, I'm telling you, my people, we need to fight. We need to take care of our mental health. Then we need to get up and get out so that people can recognize the things that we have. We are very talented as human beings. We have things inside us, but we have already built a very big wall in front of us that we think we are protecting ourselves from violence. But we need to break that wall. We need to speak out. We need to take initiative to get out of the bed, stand up, go out, and show yourself who you are. Because as humans, we cannot be killed just for us being breathing. That is impossible in any country, African context. So we should always try our level best to show our visibility.
Yeah.
Because
thank you, Mama.
We are who we are.
Thank you, Mwamba. And I think, it's really your words are quite reflective of, I guess, the sentiments that we're seeing so many young activists in Nigeria and in Ghana actually literally challenging the norms. And so, Joanne, I'm very curious, Hong Kong is obviously very unique, and it's got very different, I guess, a very different political climate. And I guess, there's so many different things to juggle within the context of activism, within the context of, let's say, democracy in itself, and within the context of even accountability. What are maybe two key things that maybe we can draw from the Hong Kong experience, because there've been quite a few court cases, or maybe even just possibly in just sort of highlighting how does that change dynamics, knowing full well that it's I think the British administrative authority, while still, under, Chinese, some level of Chinese control. So, within that context, would this form of visibility of demanding rights, would it be possible? Would it be achievable? Do you think that the elements of authoritarianism within the context of our bodies, our democracy, our ideologies, our existence, do you think that there's a possibility of actually ensuring, be it marriage equality, be it public health systems that will actually allow for gender affirmative surgeries? Would it allow for, gender affirmative health, even in instances of not transitioning? Do you think that there is a possibility, despite some of the policy and, I guess, governance complexities in Hong Kong?
I think right now it's not easy in Hong Kong because we have the COVID-19, we have the political issues in Hong Kong. But I think for being a Hong Kongese, somehow I think for around 20 years in Hong Kong, we did the LGBT movement together. Within these 10 years, we do a lot of things around over the transgender issues together with the whole LGBT movement. But now the situation is not good for us to do a lot of things in Hong Kong. So I do think that transgender people can participate in a broader political issues, democracy, and join the join the society movement as transgender people. That is very important. We are not alone, and somehow if we speak out loud as a transgender people, and we do such things to benefit the whole society, and not only our community. I think that will be more powerful for us to just say that, oh, we need our transgender rights. We need the society grant us a lot of rights, but we contribute back to the society as a transgender person or people, and that's even more powerful than you are doing the transgender right. I'm not saying that we have to give up our transgender movement, but we can do it in the same place. We being a Hong Kong citizen, we contribute to the society, and then we contribute to our transgender community also.
Thank you for that, because and for me, I was just thinking about how, ensuring the last mile forward, whether it's in public health or in service delivery, and leaving no one behind, within the context of democracy and human rights, and how critical that is. And I'm now really curious, Mwamba, is it then possible to imagine that we can be able to ensure the last mile forward? Is it possible to imagine that trans individuals can be considered within the context of, let's say, electoral participation processes, or even just ensuring that, the right to water, the right to, adequate service delivery is achieved, despite the fact that we know that Tanzania has been one of the most regressive, oppressive, and suppressive environments?
We have a new president, and she's a female, and we are very happy about it. We are very sorry that we had a funeral for our last president. May the Lord rest him in peace. And so we think moving forward in the next upcoming years, things will change. Although, because we know last years and the years before, things were very bad, things were very worse. LGBT community was not being taken into consideration in health systems, in participation in leadership, in political leadership spaces. But now we see intersex people coming out, participating themselves taking themselves and showing their visibility in political spaces, asking for help, us together joining hands, going straight to government hospitals, telling them who we are. I think it's good initiative, and I think that things can change in the coming years with our new president.
So I'm very curious, because in many instances, for instance, she was, yes, a vice president, and, vice presidents are normally part of the same political makeup or the same political ideologies and mandate. And so do you think that, that she will change essentially, because it's the same political party, same political institution? What makes you feel like there will be a positive change, aside from just the fact that she's a woman? And I understand, because, women leaders across the world have really been key within the COVID response, have been key in ensuring gender parity, or in some way. And so I'm really curious as to, why do you think that there will be a change, despite the fact that only the leader has changed, and not necessarily the political machinery, the institutions that were actually, politicized or instrumentalized in oppressing trans and the broader LGBT community?
Number one, why I think so things will change is because at first women issues were not being taken into spaces, were not being listened to. And when you look at the similarities between women issues and trans issues, is we both face, especially during these occurrences of women issues whereby they have been violated, transgender violence. So as Samia Suluhu, I believe she keeps women issues in front, and we are going to work in intersecting with other women's, trans and women's, to work to work forward and to bring change in the gender system. So yeah, I think things will change. She will listen.
Yeah.
A plus is that we have now registered our organization as a trans organization. I thought this would be denied, but we have got through. So that is another highlight. I mean, I think there is acceptance in front of us.
Thank you so much, Mwamba, especially for bringing in the lens of intersectionality. And Kimberly Crenshaw, I mean, as the pioneer for this concept, has really been quite great in not just sort of advancing some of the issues around racial and gender discrimination, but also other aspects of identity. And, Joanne, I'm then now curious on whether you think, some of the elements, and I think, more recently, if I'm not mistaken, she had actually released a statement to speak, against the anti-Asian violence that's occurring in America. And I think that, this has now been shared, especially around right-wing or religious fundamentalist institutions, organizations, and more recently, even with the Catholic Church, actually sort of denouncing that they wouldn't actually, was it sanction or was it bless same-sex unions? So I'm very curious, what do you think, all these global developments mean for such a unique environment such as Hong Kong? And I'm asking this because, we've acknowledged how LGBT tourism is such a big thing, and, people really value, they call it pink money, and, there's an increase in advertising and economic participation around LGBT tourism, particularly around Southeast Asia and so forth. So I'm very curious, why, in as much as, yes, local experiences are important, and I think, Mwamba has highlighted, issues of violence, and similarly, you have highlighted issues where, I think local context is very important to consider when it comes to decision making. How do we then ensure that we're still globally relevant? How do we ensure that, if we're to occupy or be visible, to occupy space and be visible, that those who are left behind, for instance, because we don't have observer status, or because our organizations are not registered, yet we're still expected to be visible at UN spaces. We're still expected to be visible, I guess, in regional economic communities. And how do we then ensure that we can still demand those rights, that we can still ensure our existence in this global political order, despite some of these oppositions? And I ask that because the opposition is really quite the same. The religious fundamentalism that is experienced in Nigeria, in Ghana, in Tanzania, is the same sort of elements that are experienced in Eastern Europe, for instance. It's the same elements that, are coming out within the context of developed nations. So, why do you think that it's important for us to, I guess, be conscious of, global developments, whilst we're still ensuring that, those who are not there, they can be solidarity, and that they can be, visibility for all of us in our diversity, even though we're not always in the same space, in the same conference, or in the same, I guess, maybe policy issue?
I think there's a lot of strategy we can do in this area, but I treat him as friend because I'm Christian. And I don't know why I can do that, because, somehow I realized that why they always against the LGBT people, because of fear. And when we talk about our fear, and they have fear also. And when I realize that kind of fear, I think I need to be a bridge and talk with them and be fan of them. Not that kind of close friend, but I will not treat them as enemy, because when you treat them as enemy, you cannot communicate together. And they have fear, and we have fear, and all together is a lot of struggling. But when I treat them as friend, I can talk with them in eco platform, and they understand our issues, and I understand why they have that kind of fear, and with some sort of we can understand more about each other. And I really found that sometimes, there's still a lot of nonsense you cannot solve, but at least I can find some way out. For example, I can understand how to be planned on the litigation, for example, and how to because in Hong Kong we are talking a lot about the anti-discrimination law, and there were about the same-sex marriage, and can we have a civil partnership instead of the same-sex marriage? You know, a lot of countries, they have civil partnership instead of a same-sex marriage. So there's a lot of things we can still negotiate and put that on the table and then talk to the government, because the government will feel that there's a lot of people against us and they can do nothing. If we have the kind of, for example, like one table, like both of us, but we can talk to the people who are against us, then we can know more, plan more on a strategy how to do it better in our country.
Thanks, Joanne. I mean, you know, and dialogue is very important, and I think it's I guess it's one of the most key enablers of ensuring that there can be some common ground. And you know, then now I'd like to ask Mwamba. You know, Mwamba, what do you think? You know, when we speak about dialogue, and this is very important for us because you know, if we can't be that visible, if we can't have voice, especially with political or policy making, you know, how else then can we actually sort of achieve that freedom from fear? How else can we achieve liberties and expression? So I'm very curious, Mwamba, how can we sit down with our oppressors? How can we, try and, cool ourselves? Because we know there's tone policing. We know that our experiences will be invalidated because it consistently happens. And we know that these are the same people who are, in public rallies will want to oppress us and oppose us, and who will tell us that, we're un-African, and who will tell us that we do not belong and we haven't existed. How should we sit down and try and have dialogue with those who literally want to kill us? So I'm really curious, Mamba, please, maybe you might be able to share some of that challenge. How should we overcome, where there are triggers? How should we overcome, and should we do it in the first place? Because, there's so many different ways of securing liberation. Mwamba?
Thank you so much. That is a very, very big question to me, because I have also been struggling of the same thing. So for me, what I have done, because I have been avoiding speaking with my oppressors, people who think have the key to change things, but they are not on my side. It has been challenging. But you know what? In the end of the day, we come back to communication. Nothing can be solved without communicating. Requesting for meetings. Convening meetings with the stakeholders, with the people who we think can oppose us in any ways. And this has been happening to me when we come back down to the family level. Back then, when they still did not accept me, I remember that I used to force things. I used to tell them, this is this. If you do not understand me, take it or leave it. But I have forgotten that change does not happen in one day. Change does not just come in one day. These things, it's a continuation of things. Just like us as we are transforming. It is not a one-day thing. It is an everyday thing. So we need to do more advocacy on ourselves, more advocacy, to the stakeholders. We need to meet people who are on power, who we think that they can give us some sort of light, or even we have to be ready to listen to what they need to say about us, with the critics, the bad things. Let's take it in. Let's not put anger in front of us. Let's take it in, because we know ourselves. They do not know us. That is why they come out with the bad words, abuses, although they're in power. So we need to take things slow. We need to have this convincing mechanism. We need to learn to take in a lot of information as trans activists, because each and every day things change. So we need to come up with strategies. We now have a new president. We need to approach strategies. We can't use our old strategies anymore because they are not working. That is why we need each and every day we learn new things so that we may approach in new ways. So there is no other way of approaching our stakeholders, our oppressors. It's communication.
That's so powerful. Thank you so much, Mwamba. And then, Joanne, maybe one thing that I need to ask then is, within this context of, just not just this commemoration, but also more broadly, non-binary issues are often quite invisible. And, it's often very difficult. And it's understandable also because they're aspects of, self-determination. And, we've had so many notable pop culture or entertainment figures that have come out as non-binary, which has been great in stimulating, whether that communication, that advocacy and conversations. And I'm very curious, Joanne, how then can we safeguard the existence of non-binary individuals? Because there are non-binary individuals who don't identify as trans, and there are those who do identify as trans. And so there's so much complexity and nuance that sometimes, because we have to communicate and we have to be effective and impactful in our communication, that, there's some communities that are left behind. There's some aspects of diversity that aren't always allowed in the room. So, what do you say about, non-binary experiences and the need for them not only to be advanced, but for them to be celebrated, for them to, be a part of this leaving no one behind, to be a part of the last mile forward that's included, be it in human rights, in public health, or even in service delivery, or even in demanding rights? How can we ensure that non-binary experiences can be given, just as much light and just as much attention and just as much beauty in terms of experiences in the world, in terms of safety, and in terms of freedoms? Joanne?
I think before I answer this question, I want to add on a little bit about the things I talked about just before. Because in Hong Kong, we don't have hate crime in Hong Kong. So it's quite different between Hong Kong and Africa or the rest of the world. Because in Hong Kong, Taiwan, and mainland China, we never heard about being a transgender would be killed by the oppressor. So that's why I can talk with them.
Oh, yeah.
So for the yeah, it's quite different. So I'm not asking the other people to talk with them.
Yes, of course. Context is important, safety is important, yes.
Yeah, safety is important. And when we talk about non-binary people, I think I have a privilege to have a lot of networking within the whole region. For example, Hong Kong, mainland China, and Taiwan. And when those people or medias, they come up to me, I always tell them that transgender is not someone identified as a man or a woman. They cannot accept their gender identity as a man. They can identify as non-male, but not only female. And then when they ask for people to interview, and I will introduce them some of my non-binary friends, and so that they can have the opportunity to talk with the media, or talk with the student, or talk with the people who engage with the policy change. So I try to provide more opportunity for them to voice out, because a lot of people, they can see how those transsexual people are being, they want to have surgery, or they want to have the ID card change, ID marker change. But in fact, for a lot of the gender non-binary people, they don't even have a voice to talk with their society. So every time when people come up to me, I just give them a lecture and then invite my friends to talk with them. So this is my strategy. And also, as I told you before this recording, I'm now identified as gender non-binary. But you know, when people look at me, they will treat me as a woman, and I just need to spend a lot of time to tell them, I'm not a woman. Even though you classify me as a trans woman, and then okay, but I'm not that kind of woman. I'm not 100% woman. And then for a lot of things, I also stick on my interests or my behaviors as a man or non-binary. So when I talk to men, I use a man voice. When I talk to a woman, I use a more feminine voice. And also a manner, and so that they can feel comfortable and easy to communicate with when I've been with a non-binary transgender people, and I feel very happy on that. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Joanne. And I like, for me, what came out is how there are so many different unique experiences, and that it becomes so hard, I guess, as activists to try and capture some of these experiences, and especially the nuances in day-to-day, experiences that they're not reflected always in data, they're not always reflected in policies, they're not always reflected in laws, and in as much as, yes, we speak about the universality and the indivisibility of human rights, it's not always reflective, it's not always accepting, and it's not always enabling. And I'm now, curious, and this may be, to Mwamba, obviously language matters, obviously context matters, and obviously, how we sort of express ourselves and how we occupy space matters. And so, as Joanne was speaking, I was just thinking, there are elements where you can get quite tired, in sort of always, educating, and in always having to explain. And, and in many instances, especially for me, I always sort of try and, whether I'm in a retail store, whether I'm in a bank or whatever, I always then, I speak, and because I've understood and I've seen the pain and the danger of being silent, so Mwamba, in a context that, is oppressive and obviously highly political, I'm very curious, how do you advocate or advance for rest? How do you, let's say, pick your battles? How do you sort of, how do you rest? How do you exercise, I guess, the choice of, which battle to choose? And really more broadly is, how do we continue to exist knowing full well that we're around, where there's elements of violence, elements of hate, and elements of exclusion, but more importantly, how do we then rest? How do we ensure that we can continue and live for another day?
Yes, my first thing, what I do is I choose my environment. I listen to my instincts a lot, and I choose environment. I believe I create safety around myself. If I were to walk and go to a beach, I need to know, is it congested? Is it free? I need to know, I need to set my environment. I need to know who is around me. I need to know the people who support me. I need to know then the people who are against me, so that I can stay far away from them. But when incidents happen, a battle just comes to me that is unexpected. Maybe I went to the bank, and then the bank teller is very new and is now wondering about my gender, telling it in loud voices so that people can hear. I just stay calm, and then I try to tell her in a very normal voice that it's 1, 2, 3, because these are the things that happen every day. Every day when I wake up, when I go to the airport, they need to check whether I'm a female or a woman. Every day when I go to the bank, they need to talk about my gender identity. So I need to know all this environment, that I am now going to an environment whereby they will ask me a lot of questions. This is how I will respond. I'm now going to an environment whereby no one knows about me, but they're surprised. I need to know how I treat my hygiene, my body, myself. So first of all, I just stay in negative environment that I know it will cause pain to me. I stay away from it because I know my job is defending human rights. I meet people, verbal abuses. I meet with the discrimination. So to me, I really care about my time and my space. So environment, very positive environment, taking good care of myself. And when I have overloaded work and I still face violence, I don't push to the limit. I do not overdo it. I just take time. I take break for myself because I know that there are people who are depending on me, people who need my help. So I need to be okay. So I have to take time for myself because this is the life that we choose, and we wake up each and every day serving people. And so we need to take time for ourselves too. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Mwamba. And, as you were speaking, I was just reminded of Alice's words. Sorry, not Alice. I was reminded of the rest is an act of political warfare by Audre Lorde. And so, I'm very curious, Joanne, for you, what does rest look like? What does, because I can imagine, yes, in as much as contexts are different, and you mentioned how maybe in some instances expression can, maybe sometimes meet norms, and people would then sort of treat you as they would a woman. How, for you, what does rest look like? What does what does the ability to actually have peace amidst a hurricane or a storm? How do you, as an individual who has to navigate different spaces, exercise that act of warfare, that rest?
Okay. But what you mean by rest?
So, in many instances, people get very tired and exhausted from, having to consistently defend and having to be an activist and having to complain and shout, when you're treated wrong. So, so how do you, how would you exercise that rest?
I think sometimes when I was in Hong Kong, I walked to the beach and I just rest myself and being alone, and I feel very comfortable for being alone, but not really lonely. And after 10, 11 years in the activism, I feel that I need to take a break. Mm-hmm. And I need to spend more time for myself and also for building up the other activists to keep on the movement, because I cannot do that alone, and we cannot do that with only a few transgender activists in Hong Kong. So we need to build up more activists, and for that, I need to have more knowledge. And then I come to Taiwan for studying, and I feel very happy for the studying. I read a lot of books, and I read a lot of theories, practice, and how people do the advocating in every other countries. And I learned a lot of experience in Taiwan within the feminism, and I think the LGBT movement is quite the same, because they learn a lot from the US or the European countries, but what I'm doing now is dig out more of the philosophy. For example, Chinese, we have yin yang. So it's about masculine and feminine. And this is not that kind of the theory from the Western countries. And this kind of knowledge enlightened me a lot and give me a lot of inspiration. And when I read the books, I don't feel tired, and I even don't walk around in the Taipei city. I just read the books, and that keep me very powerful and also have a peaceful status. And then I think after that I can participate in a different position that we can contribute even more in the movement, because you know when you are always day to day doing that kind of activity, it's quite tight. But now when people ask me about transgender, I can show them a lot of the other people what they are doing, and that I can save me a lot of time, you know.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Joanne. And I think, you know, that's a brilliant way for us, you know, sort of caveat into maybe our closing remarks. And I will then start with Mwamba. Maybe if there's something that you feel like should be like a key recommendation to enablers, whether it's development partners, whether it's funders, or even governments, that can sort of strengthen and safeguard trans visibility in terms of South-to-South experiences. What is the one recommendation that you'd have in enabling, you know, I guess, increase in collaboration and increase in solidarity for trans activists across the global South? Wamba?
Me, I do not have much to say, but what I can say is people should be more welcoming in their platforms. Because years back long, we were never been welcoming in different platforms, like women's platforms and political platforms. And then we were very discriminated, but now times changed. We are being tolerated, but tolerance is not the answer. We should be invited because we are also human beings. So me, I think for the stakeholders, political people who are in power, they should hear this, that in order to bring change and to move forward, we should not act like enemies. We should embrace each other. Embrace each other, because we too are human beings. We are embracing whatever you decided to identify yourself and call yourself. And we also need the same thing, because love is supposed to be a to and away front from each other. That is the word.
Thank you so much, Mwamba. And Joanne, maybe one recommendation in terms of extending you know, solidarity across the global South. What would that be to ensure, safeguard, strengthen trans visibility?
I want to iterate that Wamba talked that about love. Love is the most powerful strategy and elements in the world. I think to love yourself and love the LGBT people and also the society, also love your enemy, because they hurt themselves a lot, because they hate us so much. They hate us so much, and then they are in a lot of trouble because hate didn't make them feel comfortable. So when we love ourselves, we love everybody in the world, and we are the most powerful people, and we can do everything.
Thank you so much, Joanne. Thank you so much, Mwamba. I mean, as you're saying that, I was just thinking about the words of James Baldwin and Toni Morrison, who have advocated for love and love work, and the need for us, you know, to have this reflecting, not just in philanthropy, but in development, in community organizing, you know, in our resting and in our visibility. And so I'm truly, truly grateful for having the both of you join us to commemorate International Transgender Day of Visibility. It has been an amazing chat, and I'm super grateful that we're able to actually at least convene virtually, and hopefully we can be able to meet again in the near future. Yeah. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank
you. Thank you.